gentlemen, welcome to the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Hi, yeah. Didn't know that was going to be throwing me so fast.
Hello, and we do this podcast in order to review, discuss, and absorb what we learn from art. And it could be any sort of medium. It could be movies, it could be documentaries, it could be music, it could be video games, yada yada yada, right? So this week, for my selection, I decided to pick my favorite documentary, and that's a huge thing to say.
Yeah.
And it is a documentary done by John Boyes of Sports. I was about to say the wrong thing. Of SB Nation. Excuse me. Thank you. With their YouTube page now called Secret Base. I haven't researched why exactly that is the case. I don't know. Maybe Secret Base. Maybe. We're theorizing here. Reckless speculation. But it is called The BOB Emergency, and it is with the subtitle, A Study of Athletes Named Bob.
It's an emergency.
And what this tackles is how it's basically the rise and the fall and the excellence and the decay of Bobs in sports.
Purely by numbers.
Yes. And it's just no sort of interview has occurred for this. This is not a traditional documentary. This is just mostly done by one man looking at a bunch of stats.
Yeah.
But the impressive thing that he does for this documentary is how he tells stories through these numbers that don't really mean anything, but he brings so much meaning to what they represent. And we're definitely going to get into that today. But Mac, you had a thought that you want to discuss with the BOB Emergency, a study of athletes named Bob, which is just a really funny thing.
Yeah. I kind of want to start it off with, it goes through the story of 9 different Bobs, right? And
only 9?
Only 9, yeah.
What do you mean?
Obviously there's like hundreds or thousands of Bobs, but
he tackles a lot of Bobs in this.
No. He says in the description only 9. Today there are only 9.
Oh, right. Today there are only 9. Yes.
Yeah.
My apologies.
And he goes into every one of their stories, every one of their specific adventures and whatnot in
the rise and the fall,
because it starts out obviously like Bob was not a normal name before the 1800s or whatever, and then there was definitely like a spike of Bobs throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and now there's only there's only 9 Bobs in sports.
Yes, as of the making of this documentary in 2019, which it's reasonable to assume that the number has stayed the same, we would hope. There are now only 9 Bobs in sports.
Professional sports.
In all professional sports, thank you. Including like collegiate sports as well.
Oh, yeah.
But, nevertheless, but not like amateur leagues, right?
Sure.
So we get the beauty of Bobs in sports, and we see that throughout John Boyes' research, there are years and years and years, primarily throughout the middle of the 20th century, right? There's a giant peak of Bobs, and there are some years that have over 200 Bobs in sports. And dare I say, ladies and gentlemen, those were the golden ages.
Yeah.
I don't, we're going to get into a lot more specific detail about what John Boyes does with each individual, and he covers a lot of Bobs in this document. A lot of Bobs. I think around 20-something, maybe. I think that's even being, gracious and not even talking about a lot. But he does an incredible job in the stories that he's trying to tell, and it makes this documentary of sorts tremendously unique, not only, comedic in its own funny way, and he just manages to find these clever jokes and throw them in, but also just impactful in a very strange way. It is really difficult to articulate the quality of this documentary, but the quality is certainly there.
Well, that's the thing that I think is so funny about it, and it's so enticing, is that it feels like a joke for most of it.
Because who would care about Bob's in sports?
This is the stupidest thing I've ever actually dedicated my time to.
Because if we sat down and thought about the research that had to go into this, like
Weeks.
This documentary is about an hour and a half, right? And it goes, really, for a lot of these Bobs, really into detail. Bob Beeman, Bob Gibson, Bob Hamlin, Bob Cousy, Bob McAdoo, Bob Sanders,
Bob Herrera.
Bob Sura.
Yeah.
But like stories to tell about these seemingly random Bobs, right? And but like, so the question is, why would you do that? And the answer is exactly.
Right.
From the start, honestly, I think that's where this documentary succeeds. Because if you see it on your YouTube feed and you say to yourself, the Bob Emergency, a study of athletes named Bob, that's really stupid. I have to give it a watch.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I have to.
Uh-huh.
And he does an excellent job in sort of easing the audience in, like you said, by introducing just like the history of the name Bob. And how Bob is just a lovely nickname. It's a term of endearment a lot of times for children named Robert, and it's a name that should be heralded by the greats.
Yeah. So you showed me this a couple years ago.
I think around the time, maybe a month or two after it came out, because I think I had already been following SB Nation for a little bit, and then I saw this pop up, and I'm like, okay. And I think this was the first time that I was exposed to John Boyd's style of just looking at numbers in an absurd way.
Yeah.
And so I saw this, and I was like, this is going to be stupid, and it turned out to be one of the most fantastic things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Also, one of the most difficult to explain why it's fantastic. But I knew that I had to share it with you, Mac, because I knew that you enjoyed sports, and I knew that you have a knack for storytelling, as we know. And I figured that you would get certainly a kick out of this.
Big time. So, following that experience of you showing me this for the first time, you showed me in the best way possible, which was you didn't give me any explanation, and you sat me down and you just started it. You're like, we're going to watch this now. And I had to do that as well for because I showed my family. We watched it with my family.
We're going to have to discuss their thoughts in a moment.
Absolutely. And then I also showed it to Shama, which is a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
And then I've watched it on my own, obviously. Again. So this was my fourth viewing. And the way that you have to show people is by sitting them down and starting it without them knowing what they're getting into, because I gotta say, whenever you get the concept, you're like, okay, this is dumb. I have no idea why I'm willing to buy into this so heavily. And also, you see the timestamp, which is 42 minutes and 22 seconds, and you're like,
and it also says part 1.
Yeah, exactly. And the second part is longer.
The second part is longer. So the first part is like 42 minutes, and then the second part goes around 51 minutes.
Yeah, and that's intimidating for a person that doesn't really give too much of a shit about athletes named Bob.
Nice little burp there.
Yeah, I tried to keep it contained.
That was pretty good though, until I pointed it out.
We'll see whenever we play it back.
Yeah. But anyways.
I'll try and conjure up one pretty soon.
It's definitely intimidating, like that. It's a YouTube video about Bobs.
Yeah, and
it's a hard sell.
It does not promise a documentary. It's not like it's gonna be a documentary. It seems like it's just gonna be a rail of information.
A documentary is definitely like the sort of term to like supply it to this, because it's not the easiest thing to explain. Because like I said, when you think of documentaries, you think of interviews. And not a single interview was conducted for this piece.
He doesn't even use audio from, like, really anything else. I think the only time I can think of him using audio from other things, like whether that be like movies or TV shows or anything, is like just the clips from Blue Chips.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else.
To explain, so during this, when he's looking at one of the Bobs, in particular Bob Cousy, who appeared in the movie Blue Chips.
He was in the Boston Celtics in the 50s.
Yes, tremendous athlete. He really helped grow the fast break, as it's called in basketball. Because basketball was, as John explains, very boring at the beginning. Now it's really exciting, but very, 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 very boring at the beginning. And Bob Cousy helps with that. But John Boys shows this clip from the movie Blue Chips, and without failing a single shot, Bob Cousy in much, much later years, I think in his like 60s or so, and he's, you know, in a tucked in shirt, a tie, pants, a belt, and he makes 10 free throws in a row, which is ridiculously low percentage of happening, and he just does it.
Yeah.
So, and we don't see a lot of examples of the Bobs outside of their sports, right? We may be given a little piece, right, to exemplify the silliness and greatness that they sort of compose. But we hardly see those pieces, but they definitely always aid to a lot of times their greatness, or we see sometimes their failures on the field.
It seems like the consistency that he keeps throughout each of his presentations of the Bobs is the consistency of
you got it,
like setting your expectations really low.
Yes.
By making fun of them.
Because I mean, they're all named Bob.
Right, and it's stupid. It's funny.
Yeah.
And then, like after a couple minutes of him explaining each Bob, you're like, oh, wow, that's wild. That's really impressive. And and so it's very easy to exceed your expectations because your expectations have been set so low by his dry sense of humor.
Because
no laugh track in sight.
And
like,
if you,
so dry.
And if you sit down and just ask yourself, whoever's listening, ask yourself, do you know somebody named Bob? Like, but that goes by Bob. Not a Robert, not a Robbie, not a Bobby, not a Bo. It's just Bob.
I know a Bo. Oh, I hope that what was it? 3 seconds. I hope that whole 3 seconds they were thinking to themselves, "Damn, is this turned off?" Oh, there they are.
Bob is a funny name. So yeah, you're definitely set with these low expectations.
There's a shortage. And
there are some people in particular that in this documentary that you think to yourself, "Oh, of course you're named Bob. It's perfect."
Yeah.
Bob Hamlin is a really good example, and he starts with Bob Hamlin. So throughout this piece, he goes in chronological order, right? He basically starts at the very beginning with quote unquote the first Bob, right? Not really the first Bob, but we're just going to say, the first Bob that was chronicled in sports, right? But he starts with Bob Hamlin, who was a baseball player in the 90s, and 90s baseball was the best time for baseball, but that's besides the point. Bob Hamlin.
In one sentence, why was 90s baseball the best time for baseball?
Steroids. Now.
He was like, sentence, word.
Just one word, yeah. I mean, everybody was drugged out and just...
Do you think Bob Hamlin was?
No, unfortunately. And here's why.
He should have been.
Because so John Boyce goes into detail about Bob Hamlin later on in the video when he approaches the 90s Bobs, right? And he just talks about the Bobs of no, but he brings up Bob Hamlin at the very beginning because all the Bob Hamlin's baseball cards are really bad. Yeah. They're really bad, and if you just pull up the video, right? If you don't want to watch the video, pull up the video and just go to second 19, right? And you're gonna see this beautiful image of Bob Hamlin when he played for the Royals, just looking at the camera and just holding a giant piece of paper that says his name, Bob Hamlin. And what else is there to say? And what's best about Bob Hamlin, too, is that he won Rookie of the Year, and he was an impressive athlete at the start of his career.
Stupid.
And then he became so bad at one point that there was one game when he was in the minor leagues, and he just quit during the game. He just left. He just left. Nobody does that.
And we have...
Except for a Bob.
I like that. We have the picture up right now, clearly. We're too dedicated to the picture to not have it up in front of us right now. And as I'm looking at it, that just looks like the type of Bob that would quit mid-game.
And so when this documentary, this video, this short series starts with that, it's hard to not keep going. And I really fast, I want to just really commend John Boyes for how he just hooks in an audience.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to care for these sports at all.
Yeah.
Some of these sports discussed, I could not give a damn. He talked about street luge at one point.
Yeah, Bob Pereira.
I could not, with Bob Pereira, yes. I could not care less about street luge. And that is no fault of Bob Pereira. I just don't care about street luge,
You don't
right?
blame the Bobs, okay?
And yet, John Boyes finds this incredible way to make you care about
Street luge.
About street luge.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme of things, he makes you care about stupidity. Because, and this is really what makes this video so interesting too, is how he brings these stories to light, and the stories themselves are interesting. And so for so much of my life, I get on a soapbox about how interesting sports is, and how the stories are told in sports are sometimes so much better than what fiction could ever write. If you have any idea what I'm talking about, just Google Tom Brenneman and you'll find something golden, right? You cannot write that. In sports, so much of the time, you cannot write that.
Look at the NBA Finals right now.
I mean, yeah.
It's wild.
And the fact that there's so much. There's so much. You can't write these things. And I think John perfectly exemplifies and accentuates that, because he shows these stories that otherwise you would probably never hear about. But damn, once you hear them, you're like, I was not expecting to care, but this story was told so excellently well. I am just enthralled by Bob.
Yes.
And
Right,
how
Bob
Bob lost so
Yeah.
many matches. It was
boxing, right?
Or actually, no. I think I'm getting Bobs confused. I mean, it's hard not to. There's so many Bobs. But there was a Bob in boxing that. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Bob Cyclone, who lost 13 times.
Florida guy.
And yes, and he quit. And then there was Bob, who also I think only won. Yes. No, sorry, he lost. I'm sorry that I'm getting my info all mixed up, but he lost by a TKO in Japan. And that was the last that we heard from Bob. And it's just these silly little anecdotes.
He might have died.
He might have died.
What if he... Never mind. I did want to say, before, as we throw it to break real quick, congrats. Congrats on Game 3. Very excited for your Heat.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah, of course. While we're talking about sports, the crazy stories, wanted to say congrats. All right, and we'll go ahead and throw it to a sponsor.
Break!
All right, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, just let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch more. And third, now this is really important, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hear me when I say no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, and we're back to the Artenders with Mac and Dan. Or Dan and Mac? Mac and Dan.
Lo mismo, bro.
Porque los dos.
Exactly.
Okay. So, what would you say, Danny, is your favorite Bob out of all the Bobs?
Now that is a tough question.
I know.
In this short series, John Boyes looks at 1968 and he lovingly calls it the year of Bob.
Yeah.
And because of two athletes in particular, Bob Gibson and Bob Beamon. Bob Gibson was one of the best MLB pitchers to ever walk the face of the earth. Easily, right? If you just, as John Boyes does, if you just look at his numbers, it's incredibly impressive, especially the story that goes behind it, that he was suffering from illnesses left and right growing up. And going through that and persevering, and he was so athletic that he could play both basketball and baseball easily. In the end, he just chose baseball, and once given the opportunity, he destroyed an entire league in 1968. I don't think ever in history there's been such a dominance in Major League Baseball pitching, except for that year with Bob Gibson. But what makes Bob Beamon so interesting, and John opens the second part with this, is that he was a long jumper, and he beat the world record, which had been there for decades and decades. He beat a world record by 21.65 inches in long jump. That is absurd, and how John tells that story is beautiful, because you think, oh yeah, of course, how this is building up, he's going to break the world record, right? And so he does this sort of slow pan of this ruler.
Genius, by the way, of John Boyce.
And it's slowly going right, and you think to yourself as a viewer, oh, Bob Beamon, he had to get the world record there, right? Or, okay, it's still going. Oh my god, it's still going.
And it's like 10 seconds.
Oh my god, he beat a world record by almost 2 feet.
Yeah.
2 feet.
Yeah.
It is absurd. And there was a Russian athlete that said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing here, that among Bob Beamon, we're just children.
Yeah.
Which is such a good quote. But I wanted to bring up those two Bobs because it comes down to those two because of the amount of excellence that they displayed and the perseverance, not only within their sport, but also through racial inequality, both of them being black men and both of them really having to combat this sort of prejudice that is going against them. The stories they both hold is very, very interesting, but this is very long and convoluted way to say at the very end. If I had to choose between the two, I would say Bob Gibson, because I'm a big fan of baseball, even though I love how John Boyce tells the story of Bob Beamon more. There is something more enchanting to me about looking at the baseball stats for Bob Gibson, because all those stats make sense to me, right? And the fact that Bob Gibson in a season can bring down an entire earned run average of other pitchers by 0.04 just by himself, considering that there are, at least 100, I think maybe 200, I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers, but plenty of pitchers in the MLB. So all those numbers bring so much more weight to me.
Yeah.
And it's just impactful in a weird way, and like inspiring too.
Although I will say, of course they mean more to you because of the baseball connection. John Boyce is so expert at putting things in context. That even if you're not familiar with the sport, just hearing the numbers, just the sheer numbers, is insanity. Because whenever you say 0.04, I'm like, well, whatever. But the way that John Boyce says it. Whenever he's like,
no, this is a giant deal.
Yeah, and like the context that he gives you, the other people that the other stats that he gives you to pair it next to, things like that, are really expertly done.
Well, who did you find? Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Well, no, the other thing though is that Bob Gibson is sort of like one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast.
Yes. And so. There was like only a few days ago, I think 2, maybe 3 days ago, Bob Gibson actually passed away.
Yeah.
And so like the first thing that I thought of about like with Bob Gibson is like, of course, like this documentary, right? Because this is how I was primarily exposed to Bob Gibson, but also just like the excellence. Like it's so difficult to articulate how much one player can change an entire league when it's a league like baseball, right? Like you expect it in a league like basketball, right? Like one player can change an entire league. I mean, we see it with Michael Jordan, right? But just holy cow. And unfortunately, Bob Gibson only lost his life a few days ago, which was just like a blow in a weird way, because this man had such a beautiful story. So it was
cancer, right?
Yes. Yeah. God, I hope we're not wrong.
No, it's cancer.
Okay.
Because my very first thought
That's right, my very first thought too.
Shit, it's coronavirus, and then it wasn't.
Yeah, and so it's a shame, and like he was old too, but like it doesn't make it hurt any less, and you always hate to see the heroes go.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned your relationship with Bob Gibson, and ended up choosing Bob Gibson because, funny enough, I kind of had a similar experience where I liked those two a lot, and I leaned Bob Beeman. I mean, obviously because I'm not like as baseball heavy in my life.
And John Boyes makes it like a particular point to like these. If I had to choose two Bobs, these are the most important two Bobs. He spends a lot of time.
He's right
with those guys.
Yeah. And every single time that I've seen it, I have cried at the Bob Beeman part. And whenever I showed my family, my mom and dad both, and that's the only thing I've ever seen that got both my mom and my dad at the same time. Both my mom and my dad and myself were all crying at the Bob Beeman part because it's just so overwhelming. The music, the build to it, and just like you said, the ruler where it just like leaves you there for a while. It's just unbelievable. And also the quotes that he uses from Bob Beeman, where he's like, he shows you the footage of Bob Beeman making the jump, and then right before he jumps, he's like, in this jump, Bob Beeman said, is when he felt true bliss or something like that. And then you see the jump in slow motion, you're like, holy shit, I'm gonna cry.
And right before it goes into the detail about like how far he jumped, oh god, it's so good because I'm just gonna paraphrase here because I get so excited.
Yeah,
is that like Bob Beeman heard how far he did jump but it was in meters, so he wasn't sure what exactly, and then they converted it for him, and then he heard it, and then he couldn't believe what he was hearing, and then the video shifts to a very silent but just with the music, the pan of, oh my god, he beat a world record by almost 2 feet. Like, think about, like, peak athleticism, right? Like, think about the best jumper ever, the most, like, elite physically of a human, right? Jumping a certain length, and then somebody beating that by 2 feet.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
In my mind, though, it's not as much about, like, the athleticism or the athlete. It's more like the record.
And it's defying expectations. That's, I think, what makes this whole thing succeed is that every single Bob here, in a way, they either fulfill but in more ways, they defy expectations.
Yeah. That's absolutely the truth. And I guess in my mind, I think back to like Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points. I think back to Emmitt Smith running record. I think back to all the records I can think of, or like Tiger Woods Masters wins or things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all of those are nothing in comparison to Bob Beeman's jump, because someday someone's gonna beat the Wilt Chamberlain record. Someday someone's going to beat Tiger Woods record.
And somebody eventually did beat Bob Beeman's world record, but once again, like perfectly as you said, that John Boyes does such an excellent job of giving you the context. And so you don't have to understand anything about a sport going into it when he discusses a particular sport, right? When he talks about like skateboarding with Bob Burnquist, wow. But how he's able to provide the context, and so you get that. It elicits that reaction. From you, from your mother, from your father. This emotional impact. That of just like because it's kind of like in that moment, like you believed in Bob Beeman, right? Yeah. That even though this was 52 years ago, you believed in Bob Beeman in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's where this piece gets to you, right? How the first part ends with Bob Gibson and you believe in Bob Gibson in all those moments, and then how the second part opens with you believe in Bob Beeman in that moment, and then you get plenty of other stories, right? You get just Bob Armstrong having to face through Battle Royal, and he trained Jack Johnson, who would become one of the most feared boxers in all time, or just somebody as silly as Bob Greasy, who was a quarterback that played for the Miami Dolphins, and he played with glasses.
Yeah.
Like, that's stupid. But that's awesome.
Yeah, right. And I mean, just like you said, it's just so well done. But the funniest part in my mind, as I'm watching, is seeing how John Boyce is going to do backflips to try and figure out how he's going to relate all of the Bobs back to each other.
Yeah.
How he's going to be like at the very end.
Because they're all just tied by a name.
Oh yeah,
and so some of them are not like legally named Bob, right? So we have the football player Bob Sanders, and he wasn't given the name Bob. It was just a nickname.
Yeah, right.
Lovingly given.
Lovingly given, and I'm glad he did.
Yes.
I'm glad he did get the name Bob.
And he's he's remembered.
Oh, absolutely. And so it's funny that like you're hearing these stories and you're like, how does this deal with anything? And he's like, and that's just how things are when you're a Bob. And you're like, what the hell? And like it's just this constant slap in the face of like, why am I watching this video?
Yeah.
Why am I still watching it for an hour and a half? This is idiotic. Yeah.
He even brings up, I mean, and like, so what's funny is that at the end, there is a sort of like funny but sad decay, right? With the decay of Bobs in sports, because why would anybody go by the name Bob? Really?
Right.
I mean, just look at yourself in the mirror and say Bob, and you can't help but like chuckle.
Yeah, you're like, that's just not how it is anymore.
Yeah, it's just not. So he's like grasping at straws and brings up a former Toyota executive, Bob Carter, and he did not he went DNF. He did not finish a sort of charity race that he did, but he etched his name into the stone of Bob.
Right.
And it is a story that we must hear, and it's a story that we must tell. It's a sort of like religious journey.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
There's I want to say, because I think the ending quote that John Boyce provides at the end of this video is somehow one of the most beautiful things that you can hear. Which, once again, yes, we're talking about the Bob Emergency.
Yeah, we have
a
not
study
stopped.
of athletes named Bob.
And I don't think we've said a single negative thing yet.
No, I mean, because there isn't.
It's just too good.
We have looked at a lot of things, and I think for a lot of those things, we've been able to find some negatives here and there. This is the one thing I cannot think of a single negative thing. This documentary has been done perfectly.
I only have one
absolutely
interest.
flawlessly.
I only have one like I'd be interested to see how this happens. So go ahead with your first.
But he finishes the video by saying, "There are no dull stories. People are full of wonder. No matter how you study our history, you will always find it."
Goosies. That's good. That's really good. And it's true.
But he tells that through Bob's.
Yeah.
And so it's a testament to, I think, genuinely, and I don't think this is a hot take. This is not a sizzle surf. I have no sizzle surf for today because I don't think this is a sizzle surf. I think John Boyce is one of the greatest storytellers to just ever walk the face of the earth. Because look at someone and you just give them a bunch of numbers on a stat sheet and you tell them, all right, tell a story through this.
And he does it.
Beautiful.
He does the hell out of it.
And there are some stories too that he'll take from just like things that these players have done, right? But the interwovenness of it all.
Yeah. And it's fantastic.
Magnifique.
I would be interested though to see what would have happened if he didn't follow the chronological structure he set up for himself.
Okay.
Because the Bob Beamon and the Bob Gibson stories happen like kind of smack dab in the middle. Like Bob Gibson ends the first part, Bob Beamon picks up at the second part, and then you have like 30-ish, maybe even more, like 35 minutes after the Bob Beamon story, after you're like spent. And you're like, 35 is a lot of minutes. But I love all the stories. I love Bob Sura comes after that. Bob Herrera comes after that.
Bob Sura, one of the greatest basketball players to ever live during our time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so Bob Sura, like really fast, he, before triple doubles didn't really mean anything like they do nowadays, like where everyone gets triple doubles and it doesn't even matter.
They still matter, but it's much more difficult.
Yeah. Russell Westbrook was able to get like 11 in a row. He averaged a triple-double the other season.
Yes.
Doncic is probably going through next year and almost did this year.
But before the time of gods, there were men.
And one of those men was named Bob Sura.
Yes.
And there had only been 3 people in NBA history that had gotten 3 triple-doubles in a row, back to back to back. And Bob Sura, for some reason, an absolute average player on a piss-poor Atlanta Hawks 03-04 team, and he was convinced that he was going to be one of those people that got 3 triple-doubles back-to-back.
To join the greats of George Hill, Michael Jordan, and Magic Johnson.
Yeah. Was Michael Jordan?
Yes.
Yeah. And, sorry, I just trying to remember. And, and Bob Sura, like, he was, like, so close. Like, he's 1 rebound away, I think. Mm-hmm. Like, he had 2 games down. It was the 3rd game. He went into the 4th quarter with, like, only 6 rebounds. He spent the whole 4th quarters hunting down rebounds. Like, begged his coach to stay in the game, and he let him in the game. Because, like, they weren't going to make playoffs.
It's the Hawks.
Yeah, they were awful. And so, and then, like, in the last second of the game, he steals the ball, takes it down court, and then intentionally misses a layup to get the rebound.
Which is just the greatest thing.
And with 0.2 seconds left, he gets his triple-double. And then a couple hours later, the NBA comes back and is like, yeah, no, that doesn't count.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, they were like, you weren't actually trying to make the shots. The shot doesn't count, so that wasn't a rebound.
We should sue.
We should sue.
Let's
on behalf of Bob Sura.
Yeah.
That guy deserves better.
Yeah.
He deserved to be immortalized. And you know how he was immortalized?
Yeah.
John Boyce.
There we go.
John Boyce immortalized that man. And he needs to be immortalized. His story is too grand to not live on. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, all that to say. I loved all those stories. It's just like I wish that they were maybe structured a bit different.
Sure.
That there was only like maybe 1 or 2 after Bob Beamon and Bob Gibson.
That are like
because
truly
to put
of
them
note.
Smack dab in the middle was just kind of strange.
I see.
Because those were the most climactic.
Yeah.
And story structure wise, as we know, the climax we want to push towards the end.
Yeah.
So it's strange to feel it in the middle. And then
Yeah,
be like,
I mean,
I guess there's more now.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you'll still get like some good stories, right? Primarily with, I would say, like Bob Sanders, right? And like Bob Burnquist too, right? But you certainly don't feel the same gravitas as you do with Beeman and with Gibson, which is no fault of those Bobs, right? It was, I mean, like the 2 Bobs in 1968 were just, they were as if sent down by the Lord, to grace the land that we walk.
Yes.
A lot of religious allusions.
No, it's true though. It's true. It's true.
And like it's coming from a point of like comedy, of course, but also
just like John wanted it to.
But it's like it. But I know I've said it 20,000 times already. But it is crazy what this documentary does, and it makes you care, and you don't expect to care. You expect to laugh at the whole time. Instead, you laugh with, and eventually you cry.
So really all this episode is like a 35, 40 minute long commercial for John Boyce's The Bob Emergency.
If you haven't watched The Bob Emergency...
How dare you?
What? Hold on. Let's calm ourselves a little bit.
Fine.
We have to be nice. If you haven't watched The Bob Emergency yet, how dare you? I mean,
how fucking dare you?
What's wrong? But also, like, if you listen this far, I mean, you should stop and go watch The Bob Emergency. A study of athletes named Bob.
I love his like weird call to action at the end where he was like, "We only have so many left. We must cherish them while we have them, or replenish like the stock of Bobs." It was strange.
Strange and impactful.
Yeah,
in a stupid way.
Makes me want to name my kid Bob, or change my name.
Wow, would you?
I might.
You want to do it together?
But only if we have to find a sport that we can weasel our way into first.
Right. We got to do it for John. And for the Bobs.
We don't have to be good to be marathon runners. We could just sign up for a professional marathon.
That's true.
We can technically qualify.
Ladies and gentlemen, next week, this is going to be a podcast hosted by Bob and Bob.
Bob and Bob, professional
marathon runners.
Marathon runners.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome.
All right. So, Bob.
Yeah.
What are we viewing next week?
Okay, so The thing that we are doing next week,
What?
not viewing,
What?
but doing next
Doing?
week, is we're going to be listening.
Okay.
Because we have listened to a song.
I am listening to what Bob is saying with a lot of nervous anticipation right now.
You know what, actually?
What? You can't... What?
I'm going to pull an audible right now. We were going to listen to something.
Okay.
We're not going to anymore.
I
Are you excited?
don't know.
I'm going to save the album for next time.
Yeah, okay.
I've been showing some in my classes, and I just remembered, oh my gosh, if you haven't seen this yet, we need to. And it's going to be Rona Atkinson's full stand-up special.
Titled?
Rowan Atkinson Live. He is a partial mime.
I'm happy you told me this because my face was completely blank.
Yeah. He is kind of funny. like by himself.
Only
but
slightly.
He makes sketches where he's a mime, and it's hilarious. That's Mr. Bean. It's Mr. Bean.
Oh! Yeah. Wow, I'm stupid.
Johnny English. No. You're not stupid. Rowan Atkinson's really. I'd be shocked if anyone knew that off the bat. But his mime special is unreal. Yeah, and that's what we're gonna watch, and I think it's gonna be a deep dive back into some of our roots, some of our acting roots, to talk a little bit about that and why it is he is so effective or ineffective, depending on how you see it.
All right. Bob,
Thank
you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to all the future Bobs out there.
And thank you to the great work of all the previous Bobs and the sacrifices that they've made and the beauty that they have imposed onto the world.
And Bob Boys.